then
That's fine. That's perfect. This is really nice.
So,
Oh, bottled in bond.
what was I going to say?
I don't know.
Wasn't
We were
important.
talking economy.
Was I talking about the economy? That's boring.
Yeah, you're talking-
Oh, yeah. So, you're just seeing more and more business owners that are planning and putting a plan in place, and there's a lot of consultants that are coming out that know how to help. And these people, I would say, more upstream than me, right? They're talking to you and helping you before you're ready to say, "All right, Wes, go sell me," and so. You get to a point where when you go back and forth so many times, and then you hear some of the things that are said, and you get the feeling that there's a lack of trust there, but then also a lack of understanding of how much we do in the process. There's so much that goes in, and the expertise that we bring, and how we're able to overcome objections and issues and snags. They don't realize that up front, so they're kind of like, this seems like too much money, or those kinds of, and then they say some things where it kind of feels like, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens? And I'm like, you know what? If there's this many questions up front and sort of skepticism on their part, it's only going to get worse.
Yes.
It's such a trust thing. I mean, it really is, Rick, if you think about it. It's a partnership. I mean, we largely get paid on a success fee. So while I don't own equity in your company, I kind of do.
Right.
You sell for $5 million, I get more. You sell for $1 million, I get less proportionately.
You get a percentage.
Right.
We're
So
the minute we sign that, we're partners.
It's essentially me owning call options in your business. And so if you don't really trust me implicitly, it doesn't really work. It doesn't really work. And I think some people like you see in me that I take this personally, and it's more important for me that you're happy than getting paid. That's part of it. But if you're not happy, then I'm just going to make it right, or I'm going to say I'll let you go. You don't owe me anything. You're not tied to me. You know what I mean? You can move on. Yeah, you could lose a few dollars in the retainer, but it's if you don't, I don't want you to feel.
He should have been filming this.
Well, he might be. Do you have any of it rolling?
Yeah, you're being recorded right now.
Okay, good.
So we don't have to, yeah.
No, this was good.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
This was really good.
I like just kind of the roll in anyway. And then at some point I'm like, hey, thanks for coming, and let's start to talk about, the beginning. But that's what we find is that, and I'm dealing with somebody right now, local, and just kind of well, what about this and what about that? And I'm kind of like, I don't think I'm not the right person for you, and that's okay.
When you talk about trust, one of the things that I felt really comfortable with is when you were on the buyer side, and I really felt you had my interest at heart, although you were representing the buyer. I felt like you really had concern about who we were and what our business was. And
which is true.
No, I know. No.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't fake that shit.
I'm glad you
can't fake that shit, I mean,
think
compared to what I experienced with other buyers.
Yeah.
That just numbers people could give a shit.
Yeah.
I mean, they spoke the right things. They said the right things, but they didn't walk the walk.
Yeah.
And that was a real difference when we were working together.
There's a lot of charming that goes on in buyer land. You've got a lot
seduction.
of very accomplished, very well-spoken, very, very intelligent people that have a way of talking to you in such a way that you're like, it's impressive. I mean, it's impressive. These people didn't get to where they are due to lack of ability or drive. They have all of those things. Really, where the road splits is, what does it look like once you get the LOI signed, and you get into diligence, and the QV comes back, and the coding audits come back? How do they treat you then? Do they drag it on? Do they try to beat you up after in 90 days in diligence or 120 days? What happens then? And I think that one of the things that I try to do as an advisor, regardless of the side of the table I'm on, although historically I've been in the sell side, right? I try to establish rapport with the other party and mean it, you know. And even when I represented you, I think that psychologically it's very important to let the buyer know, like, listen, I represent my client, I have a fiduciary responsibility to him, but I'm also not going to, you know, obfuscate any, like hide anything from you or withhold material facts, or there's no smoke and mirrors. I want you to know that.
I chuckle because I remember some of our meetings with buyers.
And what part specifically are you chuckling at?
That how you were so good at just establishing rapport with them, even though they were some of the weirdest dudes.
There were some weird buyers out there. This is a psych business here. Of course they're of course they're weird. But you know,
I just had flashbacks of sitting in my office with a couple of them and going, "What the?"
So, you know, I think that you get a lot of brokers that are used car salesman type, and oh, that's great, and hey, only $9.95, and I think it's important to recognize the grill in the room is that no business or no practice is perfect, but I truly do believe as an advisor, this is a great business. Here's a couple of the things that are not perfect about it, but ABC. These things are great. They have you know, large providers. The billing is great. They have a great reputation. They have a wait list. You know, they have strong referral sources, and they have treatment modalities that are proven to be effective. And they really do. They do love what they do, and they care. And you know, you have plenty of evidence to back that up. And so that really. And I finish a lot of my initial calls with buyers, and I say, hey, listen, I know what the reputation is out there, and what you might be thinking about me, but I want you to know I'm going to only deal with you on a straightforward basis, and you know, I want you to feel like that when you ask a question, you get a straight answer. You get you know, that, you know, reliable data, those kinds of things, and I find that goes a long way.
Oh yeah.
And usually you can hear the tone change on the phone. You can hear it and see it on the Zoom, where it's like they kind of tilt their head and they're like, okay. And they'll go, you know what? And by the way, we'll be the same. And if it's not a fit for us, we'll let you know right away. We're not interested in dragging out. I say, great. You know, let's be real, because there might be another deal down the road. This one doesn't fit.
Right.
You know, you know, we're not going anywhere. You know, but we want this to be an amicable discussion and real, and we want you to treat us fairly, and we're going to do the same to you. And that always changes the tone in the room. And so just tricks of the trade. I'm reading a book right now, almost done, called Influence. And it's by a psychologist named Richard Cialdini. It's an outstanding book. And it's launched all kinds of, you know, online classes and stuff. But it's funny that I was reading this the other day. I mean, it was a week ago when I read. And there's a chapter right in there that says, like, validates exactly what I just told you. That, you know, that sort of methodology of, hey, it's not perfect, but, and it builds rapport with the people on the other side of the table. And I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, you know what? It was just an instinctual thing, and now I feel validated.
You're right,
and I'm sure anybody that reads a lot of books like that, at some point get validated by something that they've instinctually done.
I also think it's who you are. Forget about the influence book or tools that work. It's who you are. You know, you're genuine, you're real. You're not trying to sell, so to speak. And I think that's what that's about. It's not some theory that you've adopted that I've got to be open, honest, and this is the tools to sell. No, it's who you are.
It's true.
And I think that's what builds that relationship, that rapport. It did with us, you know. I mean, to this day, look, I'm sitting here today, right? I don't have to do this, you know. I don't. I mean, I canceled patients. I'm losing revenue today. But because I have such respect for you and, you know, what you've done for us, that's why I'm here. It's the
you, Rick.
relationship. Wasn't even the sale. I mean, the sale could have gone south,
Yeah,
and I still would have
thank
been
you.
here.
Working for you and Marie, your wife, Dr. Domanian, was so much fun, and the whole process is always
So
it's stressful and up and down, but
you better come to her open house.
okay.
You have no idea. Did you ask him? Did you ask him?
So is she premiering some paintings that she did?
Yeah, she's been working her ass off on some oil paintings.
Count me in.
Yeah, so she's doing an open house. It's kind of her coming out party, if you would.
Well, that's exciting, and I think it's over in Oakland Park.
Yeah, it's off of Dixie in just north of Oakland.
Yeah, that whole new area that they're kind of like
The
building
arts,
up and stuff.
Yeah.
So, take us back to the beginning. I always love your stories about the different things that you've done in your life. Tonight I learned that you had a talk show at one point, but you owned a bait and tackle shop, and you did all these things, and then you became a psychologist and devoted your life to helping people.
So you want the story?
I want the story.
So I knew from a very early age that my calling in life was to help people. It just was my passion. And I thought that the only way you could do that was to go to medical school. So I was at the University of Miami. I had a degree in chemistry, was majoring in chemistry, minoring in biology. And I was pre-med. And it was in the early 70s, late 60s. And there was really a cultural revolution going on in the country at that time. And I was meeting with my pre-med advisor, and I was writing my essays for med school. I'd already taken the MCATs. And he said, "You can't write that stuff. You'll never get in."
You can't wait. What stuff?
What I was talking about, bringing medicine to the people.
Okay.
And dedicating medicine to really helping people and changing the model of healthcare and looking at rural healthcare. So you can't write that. You'll never get in.
Wow.
And
that's crazy.
No, he wasn't. It was real. I watched some of my friends, their first year of medical school, completely change values. It was a different time. And I was a bit idealistic. And so I graduated with a degree in chemistry and biology.
You said chemistry? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a major in chemistry.
Okay.
Didn't know what I wanted to do, was soul searching. This is a great story. I had an ice cream truck. This was back in the day. And Hood Ice Cream from the Northeast, the Boston area, came down here, was trying to make an entry into South Florida. And they had these beautiful ice cream trucks, brand new, they look like clowns. It's called Circus Man Ice Cream. And the trash can on the side was a big mouth of a clown, right? I'm gonna tell this. I can't remember tell this story. So we leased.
Sounds like a cash cow.
So we leased this truck, my friend Norman and I, and we leased this truck, right? And we had our own little route. I graduated early from college, so I was hanging out. And we're driving. This was in the Gables, South Miami. Yeah. So we're running our route, and some guy comes up to us, and he gives us an ice cream. I mean, he orders an ice cream, and he drops a joint on the counter, and he walks away. Right? So here we are. We're doing our finishing our route, and we're driving back on that time the Dolphin Expressway, and I go, "Norm, light that sucker up, man." Like that joint. So here we are. We're in this.
I was wondering if that was going to play into it. Or...
So I'm driving this ice cream truck, right? This big old step van. I think I'm doing 100 miles an hour on the Dolphin Expressway.
Or 7.
Right? And we're doing about 25 miles an hour. We pull up to the toll booth, and the guy sticks his hand out to get the quarter toll. Back then, we, we didn't have SunPass, right?
Yeah.
I said, Norm, give me an ice cream sandwich. The guy sticks his hand out. I slap an ice cream sandwich in his hand, and I look back in the rearview mirror. He's waving at me. And we're driving, getting this. I said, hey, Norm, do you know where we are? He says, no, Rick, where are we? I go, we're in an ice cream truck. I got the Munchies. So anyway, so that was my first postgraduate job, was an ice cream truck. Vegetables. And unfortunately, my dad died in a tragic car accident.
Oh, wow.
And I came home for the funeral, and I met a guy, and he was a fishing guide. And he said to me, was I interested in partnering with him in a bait and tackle store?
Mm-hmm.
That's where that store comes
Yeah.
from. I did, and he was a bone fishing guide out of Crandon Park Marina.
Mm.
We rented a gas station and turned it into a bait and tackle store. My landlord was B.B. Rebozo. I don't know if you remember B.B. Rebozo. He was one of Nixon's cronies when Nixon had the South Florida White House on Key Biscayne. And so we started, I was building, custom fishing rods for the...
What year would this have been?
Oh, this would have been 77, 76,
Mm-hmm.
in that era. So I was living in South Miami, and one day I'm driving to Key Biscayne about 4 o'clock in the morning, because you had to open a bait and tackle store early.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? I'm dipping shrimp, right? And I remembered I had this mentor in undergrad school, Gertrude Krause. And Gertrude taught some of the psychology classes. And I happened to have kept her number. And she said to me, I called her,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, come right over. It was later in the morning. I drove by Gertrude. She looked at me and said, you should go into psychology. You have it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that from the time you were in class. I left her house. I drove to FIU and enrolled again undergraduate in the Department of Psychology. And that was where I found my bliss. And that's where I went on. I went on to do a master's at UM, a doctorate at Nova. And that's really how I found my bliss.
Mm-hmm.
And I took all those experiences with me. And when we opened up the practice,
And so that was, early 80s by this time.
So I met Marie, my wife, in a group therapy course in UM. And we started dating. And then I went on to get my doctorate, started studying my doctorate. She followed me the next semester. And we started our doctorate work in 78 or 79.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated in 82
Mm-hmm.
with my doctorate degree.
And then you together started your practice in Plantation.
So we came back, we needed to do a postdoctoral residency,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of did that in private practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we completed that and we got licensed, we opened Plantation Psychological Associates.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just Marie and I. And we opened the doors in 1984. So it's 40 years now.
And so then how did you get patients?
In the internet. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. You invented that.
We did social media old school way. I knocked on doors.
Really?
Yes. I literally went, you think about that's social media. That's real social media. In the complex we were in, there was a primary care doc. I knocked on his door and said, hey, I'm your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
We do psychology. I did some volunteer work at the University of Miami Juvenile Diabetes center working with kids with diabetes, and one of the pediatricians who was associated with that started to refer us clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the beginning of the practice, was knocking on doors and developing
amazing.
referral sources.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. You know, one thing I would love to explore, you were in a practice with your wife, and I'm intrigued by partnerships because we deal with a lot of them, and many go well, and it seems like just as many don't go well. And obviously, there's more at stake when you're related to the person. In this case, you're married, right? And so, can you share with me some of how maybe some of the highs and lows,
Sure.
but also how you dealt with conflict and disagreements and things
Sure.
like that?
You know, I am truly blessed to have my soulmate as not only my wife, but my partner in business. We recognized very early our strengths and weaknesses. I'm horrible at detail. I'm, you know, when we look in psychology, there's people that are detail and there are people that see whole pictures. And it's interesting, what does she do? She's now a painter. And how do you paint? You paint by building details, right? You think about it, each brush stroke is a detail. Where I am impulsive and a visionary, creative. And so that was the nice blend, is that she anchored me, but allowed us to be creative and develop the program. Being in the field of psychology, we had good communication skills. I always say that the foundation of a good marriage is the ability to resolve conflict and to communicate.
Yeah. Sure.
That is the foundation of a good partnership, business partnership.
Sure.
Because I've had bad partnerships in business, right?
Yeah.
Because we were not able to. So her strength was always been, she's also really got real clear on right and wrong. I kind of walk that gray area because I can be impulsive. So she would anchor me, and still does to this day.
Yeah.
You know, so I think the way we identified our strengths and weaknesses, right, and we didn't interfere with each other's strengths and weaknesses. We managed the practice from day one. She handled all the financials, the bookkeeping, all of that stuff. I didn't want to know anything about it.
Who was better at dealing with staff?
I chuckle because the story in the office is, if Rick comes to fire you, you're going to get a raise.
You can get a raise?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
So, I mean, I had to learn how to do that. But I'd say I've evolved in learning how to deal with staff better. But Marie was always better at it initially.
Yeah.
You know, but I've learned I can fire someone now. Although I don't have to, because I don't run the practice.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. I mean, I think that you should have that complementary skill set. It's so important. And you talk about conflict resolution. To me, that's such a big, I think, something we lack as a society now. I see it with our youth. I see it with adults.
You see it in our country.
Why are we so bad at dealing with conflict? And I feel like, I think it just comes with avoidance of, it's an avoidance issue. We don't really want to have the difficult conversations, right? Because they're awkward. Whether you want to let somebody go, off your staff, or you want to tell somebody that you care about that they let you down. Those are awkward conversations and hard to have, especially with like even, let's say, a friend. And so we take it out in other ways, right? We say something like you're a teenager in high school, right? Can you believe what Rick did? You're talking behind their back, and I'm always amazed when I hear stories of people just sort of swearing off other people, and they just cut them off forever, rather than being, okay, rather than say, this is an important relationship to me. Why are we so bad at conflict resolution?
We touched on this earlier when we talked about lack of community.
Right. You're talking about when we talked earlier on the phone.
Earlier, right. Today when we were talking, and we don't have that generational models where we could see grandparents talk and resolve conflict. We're so isolated. We don't have any models to really learn about communication. How do we, I'm so amazed today. I mean, I'll call someone and leave a voicemail, and they don't return the call. And I go, what happened? Well, you didn't text me.
Yeah.
You didn't text me.
Yeah, voicemails are like invisible.
Right?
Right, it's
so
interesting.
How do I know? We're talking now and we're interacting. And I'm picking up on your subtle cues. You nod when you agree or you hear me. When we used technology to communicate, we have totally lost the fine nuances. And so we don't know how to resolve interpersonal conflict. Right?
Yeah, it is amazing. Like, I think the younger generations more and more rely on text messaging.
It's amazing.
And it's a terrible way
it's
to communicate.
It's a disservice to their development.
Yeah. You don't have any sort of nuance or context or body language or,
And so many messages get misinterpreted because you don't hear the inflection of the voice, or I can text something, but you don't know I'm really concerned. You might read it as critical. So we don't have, where in our education do we talk about conflict resolution?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. Yeah. We had an interesting, talking about education, we had an interesting experience in our community in Weston. When we first introduced the state exams for education, the achievement tests,
right?
We were hearing in our practice third graders having panic attacks, anxious, and vomiting because of the anxiety they were experiencing about the tests. We went to our area principals and we said, can we teach your teachers how to teach these kids relaxation skills and stress management? And we literally went into the schools, third graders, and taught the class and the teacher how to teach relaxation training. We don't do that anymore. There's no curriculum. There's no curriculum for conflict resolution or even communication skills. So,
it's unfortunate, but you find a lot with business owners too. They lack the ability to resolve conflict, and you get a lot of dysfunctional workplaces. And so, the culture is super important. And you can have any mission statement you want on a wall, right? But it really means nothing at the end of the day. It doesn't mean anything if it's not being lived out and practiced. And so we see a lot of that. We see a lot of that dysfunction, and I'm just kind of wondering, how you turn that around. But
well, I know one of the things that we built our practice on, and it goes back to kind of what we were talking about sensing you're caring as an advisor. we built our practice, and our tagline was compassionate care since 1984. Every one of our staff were not hired, but joined us because we knew they cared. It wasn't just about the dollar. It was about caring. And that's what makes a big difference. That's how we built the practice. We also built it, and we never turned anyone away who couldn't afford treatment. It was kind of a way for us to give back to the community. Right?
You told a story to me that I really loved.
I know which way you're going.
About a patient of yours and how you had such positive effect on their lives, but not in a way that you were thinking that it was. Do you know what story I'm talking about?
Yeah. So so this is consistent with our tagline, compassionate care.
Yeah, right.
And that was a good segue. So I had this patient that came to me that was extremely, really depressed. And at that time in my career, I was very psychoanalytically oriented. I had trained in psychoanalysis. I had personally gone through some analysis on the couch. And so we went on an archaeological expedition with her to kind of try to uncover what that source of that depression was for her. And throughout the course of treatment, it became revealed that she experienced trauma as a child, not only physical, but sexual molestation. And we worked together for a couple of years. And she started to do much better. And when we terminated treatment, she wanted to give back to the community. And so she volunteered. At that time, it's called it's called the Manic Depressive Association. It was a group for consumers. And she eventually became the president, national president of that association. Well, National Public Television reached out to her and said, we want to do a special on you. And we'd like to interview your therapist. So here we are in my office. I think we were in Weston at that time, on Royal Palm Boulevard. And film crews, not dissimilar to this, and they go, what do you think we should do? That'd be really cool. Let me interview that patient. Let me interview her to see what her experience was like in treatment. What did she gain? So we're sitting down, and I'm going to call her Mary. That's not her name. But due to HIPAA, we'll call her Mary.
Yeah, right.
And we're talking, and he was telling me, about her course of treatment. And I turned to her at one point in the interview, and I said, Mary, what was the most important thing to you in treatment?
Most important factor. Yeah.
And I'm sitting back, my ego is, she's going to tell what a wonderful therapist I was and how many insights she had and how these insights led to her recovery. And she looks at me and says, Dr. Harris, the thing that was most important to me is I knew you cared and you would be there for me. And I think that was so important for me to realize that we could do psychoanalytics, psychotherapy, relationship therapy, cognitive, whatever. But it is that therapeutic relationship that truly is the agent of change.
She knew that every day that you showed up, you were going to show up.
That's
and
right.
be there and be committed to
That's
helping
right.
her however you could help her.
That's right.
And that's such a cool thing. And obviously, it goes without saying, like,
And
you've dedicated like your life to that and all your hours to just taking everybody's baggage all day long. Like takes a very special personality and a dedication to do.
but it's also a skill not to take on your baggage, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I
like
got to
how do
go.
you not take that home with you sometimes? I
Right.
mean, it's
And I'll share with you.
yeah.
So if you remember the mentor I mentioned, Gertrude Krause.
Right.
Gertrude Krause was one of the most gifted therapists I've ever met. And I was in Gestalt therapy training with her. And her belief was you really needed to know your own issues to be a good therapist. Didn't have to resolve all of them. And so all our work with her, and I worked with her for 3 years in Gestalt training, was to identify my own issues. And so what happens is, if I can do that, I'm not triggered by you. And so
Right.
I can leave the office and know that I've been with you, but I'm not affected by you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to go back because there's, we talked about, in our office today, we have at least a half a dozen doctoral students at some level of training that help us out. And I'm going back to texting. And what I'm finding in my field that I find really disturbing is we're teaching techniques. At the graduate level, we're teaching the techniques of therapy. And we're missing the relationship that Mary shared with me that was the most important thing. And so we do all this technique-y stuff and manually driven therapy, meaning there's scripts, you can open a book. And my concern, as we start to move into AI, and we see AI start to do therapy,
Yeah. Yeah.
how effective is it really going to be? Because we know that what we're even doing right now is really important, that relationship. And as we learned from Mary, that was the agent of change, not the techniques, not the insight.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, it's fascinating. It makes you wonder what's driving that. You know what I mean? Maybe it's from a payer standpoint. Unfortunately, totally believable. But I would want to fast forward and jump into the M&A process, and talk about that journey, and start with, your sort of revelation that you shared with me about, hey, this is something I probably need to start prepping for.
So, I once read, I don't know if it was Freakonomics or something, that typically small business people, and I am, that they tend to have a skill. And they are able to do that skill really well, and they can grow, but they don't have a big picture. And so my daughter, who to this day, I wish I could tell you what she does, but she's a design strategist. Okay. I don't know what that means, but she works for Deloitte. And she went to a dual master's program at Johns Hopkins, at the Carey School of Business, an MBA. They had a program in which you also got a Master of Fine Arts.
Master's in what?
Fine Arts.
Okay.
With the Maryland Institute of Creative Arts, MICA. And the concept was they joined forces about 3 years before my daughter started this program to take the creative minds and teach them business. Because there was such a lack of creativity among MBAs. So we went up to visit. We were in Maryland, my daughter. And all parents know, what do you do when you visit your kid in college? You take them out to dinner. And you also invite their best friend.
Yeah.
Because they're on campus with no family, and it's important that they have a family connection. And so we went to dinner with my daughter and her friend. And her daughter, her friend was a little older, had been in the workforce for a while. And she told a story of a company she worked with, a small, privately owned, one owner, industrial design firm. And she said that she was saddened because the guy decided to retire and he had to close up shop. He had no exit strategy.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said,
very common.
What is an exit strategy? Now, you have to understand, they're MBA students, right?
Yeah.
So I got more information that evening that I wanted to know about exits. But bottom line was, think about selling your goddamn business, right? So, and kind of serendipitously, that summer we were in North Carolina, and I bumped into one of my colleagues. And we always bump into them. They had a psychologist. Him and his wife were psychologists, had a practice in Coral Springs. And he said, I saw my practice. And I said, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Exit strategy. And he told me about the private equity firm he sold. So I reached out to them, exit strategy, and started to talk and negotiate with them. We got to a point where they were ready to give us an LOI, but they did not understand our practice. At that time, we tend to, as I shared, we tend to be a little innovative on the leading edge of implementing new treatment techniques, new modalities, and they didn't get it. I think it was shortly thereafter, not after that, I met you. And you were on the buyer side and represented another, not private equity, but another
private equity backed
buyer.
Yeah.
And we have a joint friend that we didn't know about that time. My financial planner you knew from Indian Guides or Princesses. And so we started to negotiate with your former firm. And that's how we got to know you. That deal kind of fell through the cracks. And then we engaged 6 months later, I guess it was.
Yeah.
We engaged 6 months later.
Yeah, we worked on some of the components of the practice in the meantime to kind of more align it up and make it more of a...
Let me, this is important because the role you served as an advisor. So our growth continually was on a growth course. And we took a dip. Our profit took a dip. Our gross revenue took a dip, partly because we invested in some new technology. And we were given wrong information by the purveyor, is that the right word, of the technology on reimbursement. So we took a big dip. And through your counseling, helped us get through that period where by the time we were able to re-engage, we had exceeded the previous year revenue. And it was through your guidance and your help with your consultants that we're able to improve our revenue and our profit to get us ready for sale.
Yeah, and I think that when I brought Melissa from my team in, who's our healthcare specialist, and you were pursuing an in-network IOP under the current umbrella for eating disorders, right? And then we were talking about, some of the other technology, and we said, hey, let's not focus on this for now. Let's focus on one thing at a time, and get that up and running and growing, and get that, get those collections up, get that margin up. And I think once we got that going, then we were kind of off to the races, and then the buyers started coming in.
And again, this is what's so amazing about having you, was we would never have thought about that and your team, right? We probably would have been still struggling with that IOP to see if we can make it work. We wouldn't have jettisoned it.
Yeah, I think one of the guys that I like to follow a lot in the entrepreneur world is a guy named Alex Hormozy, and he's very well known and followed out there. But he talks about a lot of business owners, how they tend to, their issues are not in the ideas, but in the execution of the ideas. So I think this was a good example of, hey, we had two ideas that we were exploring. Let's not worry about this idea right now and focus on this idea and executing on this idea. And that's exactly what we did. Is a perfect example. And you did execute on it. I couldn't do that for you, but I think the strategy was kind of how we were trying to guide you in the right direction. And that was a perfect example. When Hormozy said that in one of the podcasts I heard, I'm like, that's Rick Harris right there.
Right.
Like, hey, these are great ideas. I'm sure you could do individually well on either of them. To do them both at the same time, like, let's do this, boom. And then next one, if we're really good here and we got it humming and running, then we can talk about this later. But I think this is the lower hanging fruit, right? This is the better margin business.
And let me share, because when we first went to market, I didn't know anything. Well, it's not true. I had sold a previous healthcare business, but was not really involved in that sale. But we didn't have an advisor. When we were dealing...
And why was that? Why did you choose to go that route?
Naivete. I didn't even know that existed. Honestly. And I think it was partly ego. I thought I could do it, right? I mean, I thought that I knew so much about our business that I could, there's a saying that I learned, there's so much I learned, don't leave anything on the table, right?
Sure.
Meaning that you want to get as much money as you can in the sale. And I was a bit grandiose to believe that I could do that, right? And so when we were doing the negotiations at the first prospective buyer, I did it all by myself. I mean, Maria and I'm sorry, I don't mean to exclude you, Maria, but together we were negotiating that deal. And yet we didn't know enough, right? I had to learn about EBITDA and multiples and all this other stuff, which was ridiculous because it was taking me away from the practice, and the stress involved. It wasn't until, and I have to tell you that for anyone that's thinking about an exit strategy, it's a lot of work. You were demanding on my behalf.
Right.
We had to get you. I mean, if I hated to look at my email.
Yeah.
Rick, we need this. We need that. Right? And meeting with Elliot. What's this number? And why is this number on that spread? I'm not a numbers guy, right? But we're having to put it together.
And think about doing that all on your own. And then all the stuff that we did in addition to that, right?
Yes.
What was it about the process? Was there anything about it that surprised you or that stood out as to what you didn't know or couldn't have ever imagined? I mean, from start to finish.
So, for us, it was a process. So by the time we closed, I felt like I had a good grasp on the process. But when we first, again, what the hell is EBITDA, right? What is ad backs? What does that mean? What is an ad back? I mean, we
I always
make,
joke with my friends that I have a PhD in ad backology.
you
You
do,
got to. You can't. You got to
you
find as much
do.
money as you can for your clients. But
Yeah, so we learned a little bit about how to maximize our profit so that we could get the most money for the practice. And I am convinced that we got the best deal at that time that was out there, thanks to you. I really believe that. And part of for us was to make sure that whoever we sold the practice to had the same value as we did. I had sold a healthcare practice many years ago to a company that just ruined our company. Nationally, they ruined it. And
that's a big challenge.
I wanted to make sure. And you were really good at telling me, you know, what you felt was the best fit for us. I mean, I believe at that time we had three
Yeah.
offers on the
Yeah.
table.
We had a lot of interest, especially in the second wave when we kind of got,
Yes.
we got
When we
things
would
headed
tweet,
in the
yeah.
right direction, and it was clear the practice was growing and it was
Yeah.
healthy. But like, was there anything in the process where we got done that you were surprised and or that you learned the most from in terms of the process? Because I think that a lot of the folks that we deal with, whether they hire us or not, I don't think they realize how much goes into it. And the LOI is just the beginning, right? I mean, a typical LOI on average is probably 4 pages, and the APA, the stock purchase or asset purchase agreement, 30 pages, 40 pages, 50 pages, schedules, appendix, So there's that much more to talk about after you get into diligence. Now you've got lawyers involved, right? Because they're negotiating the definitive agreement and all the reps and warranties and all those things, and working capital and all that stuff. And I don't think people realize how much goes into it.
We had a couple of LOIs, and we went through a couple of due diligence. I had no idea. Surprise? What due diligence was.
Funds just get started then.
I know, right?
So you're a big music festival guy. One of the things that I loved about one of our conversations, and we've had many conversations that I've enjoyed, but you were going to some music festival in Kentucky, and I said, "Oh, who are you going with?" And he was like, "I'm nobody. I'm going by myself." And I said, "Really? That's so fascinating." I have friends that go to movies by themselves. I'm like, I've never done that. I don't know why, no particular reason, but you were like, I don't want anybody to hold me down. And that sort of like independent spirit kind of like embodies you to me, like what I know of you. And I think that's so great. And your office is adorned with all these posters of the festivals you've been to over the years. And like, how many do you think you've been to?
I started going to festivals. This is really interesting. In 1969, there was a music festival called the Miami Pop Festival, and you can Google this because it's famous. It was at Gulfstream Park in Hollandale. And it was a 2-day or 3-day, I don't remember, and Jimi Hendrix was there.
In 59.
69.
69. Okay.
What was made it?
I was trying to do the math here.
Yeah, no, 15.
Yeah.
I'm not that old. I'm old, not that old. The guys that put that festival on were the same guys that in August of that year did Woodstock. They had done this festival as a trial to see what it was like to do festivals. It's like their pilot study.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it was in Gulfstream Park.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was the first one.
That was the first.
And how many have you been to since if you had to ballpark it?
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, just this year, I've been to Railbird, Bourbon and Beyond, New Orleans Jazz Fest, just this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just got back from Bourbon and Beyond, which it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Bourbon
I
and
brought
Beyond.
out the special stuff for
Yeah.
Rick today. The delicious Colonel E.H. Taylor small batch. I don't know that much about bourbon. I've only been drinking a couple of years, but I'm quickly becoming a snob like you.
Yeah.
It seems infectious.
But you know what? I'm not very knowledgeable. I just enjoy different bourbon. It's kind of like wine. You know,
Oh, it is.
Each bourbon has its own flavor and smell and taste and kick.
And so, yeah, my partner at SM2, Dan, who's also my mentor, he is a bourbon aficionado.
Oh, is he
And
really?
oh, yeah. And he doesn't even drink frequently, but when he does, it's either bourbon or red wine. And we've actually had at some of the networking events we've done, we've had bourbon tastings, and I just do all the work and pour it, and he walks you through, he'll bring 6 bottles, anything, starting with Maker's Mark all the way up to George Stagg or Pappy Van Winkle, and he just walks you through how it's made.
Oh,
And it's
that's so-
fascinating. I don't even think you have to like bourbon to find it fascinating.
No, you know,
because you know so much about it.
yeah, it's really cool to do the Bourbon Trail,
Oh, I'm sure.
which is where you get to go all the distilleries,
And to your point, just like put a bow on that, but he's talking about with the Stag, you can pour it and drink it neat, or put a dash of water, or put it on the rocks, and they're all 3 taste totally different. It's totally different.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
But
that
you
just
can-
makes it unique to me.
I know these are very important glasses.
They are. We're gonna smash them in the fireplace later on, but
However, they're not the right glasses for bourbon.
oh man, it's a highball glass. What's wrong with that? Oh, you like the Pitcairns or whatever?
Yeah, I know.
I have some of those with our logo on it, but it wasn't,
No, this
like
this,
this
this is
better.
a nice glass. I'm not complaining.
We do have those. Next time I'm gonna bring them.
There we go. There we go.
We have SM2 ones, but
But yeah.
so when you drink it bourbon at home, you're
So I drink on a rock. In
like a big one,
A round one.
round, yeah.
A big one.
Right.
Big round. I don't know why round, but a round one. And just a little splash of water. Allegedly, a little splash of water releases the flavor. I mean, most bourbon people drink it neat like we are. But I do like it a little chilled with a little splash of water.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I'll do it both ways, but for here at the podcast,
No,
I
this
feel
is
like
so.
it's like,
Listen to this music festival I went to. It's called Bourbon and Beyond. It's in Kentucky. At this point in my life, I do buy a VIP ticket. The VIP area is sponsored by Angel's Envy, and you walk in, and it's a beautiful tent, air conditioned toilets. That's important at a
Yeah.
festival.
yeah, sure.
You got to be able to.
Yeah, you don't
piss
have to
where-
sell me on that.
Right. You don't want to sweat when you're pissing. Right?
Yeah,
They free pour Angel's Envy all day long. No charge. It's fun.
what's the best one you've been to and why?
Oh gosh.
You already said Hendrix. I mean, it's kind of hard to beat that.
I just saw the Stones in New Orleans. What was that? That was the first weekend of May. New Orleans Jazz Fest was.
That was when we closed. You were up there. Yeah. Yeah, you
So this is a
you
funny.
signing your phone. The thing.
This is a funny story, right? So I'm in New Orleans Jazz Fest alone, and I take the cable car. I don't. They're not called cable. Streetcar. On Canal Street, all the way down to the end, and I'm going to find their beautiful botanical gardens. And all of a sudden, you start texting me. Have you reviewed the LOI or whatever? Or no, it's actually the
closing
the
statement.
closing
right? Yeah,
statement.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in this beautiful setting, right? And I'm reviewing the closing statement. I think I signed right before the Rolling Stones came up.
Isn't technology great? Hey Wes, the wire hit. Here comes Mick.
That's right. Here comes Mick. I should show you the picture of Mick because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah.
You know, working with you and Marie was such a pleasure, and it's such a great joy in my life to do this work, which is oftentimes so histrionic and so stressful, but meaningful at the end of the day. And to work for people like you who have made a living by helping other people is just an amazing thing to do, to go to work and do that every day. And the fact that you guys, you know, appreciated me, you know, it's not a requirement in what it is that I do, but it just makes it so much more fulfilling, because I think that there's probably a lot of people in this country that go to work every day and don't have that fulfillment. And one of my favorite leaders on public figures is Mike Krzyzewski, the coach from Duke.
Yeah.
And I always kind of liked him. I was never really a big basketball guy.
Right.
He's just somebody that appealed to me, and Duke is obviously a highly respected institution. But he just released a master class not long ago, and I watched his whole master class on leadership and how he treats his kids and how he turns them into leaders and nurtures them, and he cares about them.
Yeah.
And even the ones that don't go to Duke that he got to know, where they transfer, like he's such a thoughtful person. But one of his favorite quotes that he says is, all any of us really want in life is to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so, I mean, that was the first lesson in my MBA school, was that the most important factor in job satisfaction for people is to feel important. Money was number 4.
Yes.
Money's
it's
important. It
fascinating.
is important.
Yes.
But I just want to know that I'm going, if you think about it, it makes total sense, right? You're going to work every day, 40, 50 hours a week, sometimes more. You want to feel like you're doing something that's like, has some relevance to
and you
something
feel
bigger
valued.
than just, right, your and pushing paper around and going to meetings and all of these things. And so to be able to work with you and Marie
Oh, thanks.
and
Yeah.
this journey, which was not easy, which, by the way, in this world is never easy. Anybody that tells you it's easy is like, I always get a kick out of when I hear Rocket Mortgage, like push button, get mortgage. Mortgages have never been easy, ever. And so it's the same thing, you know, with M&A, but to do that and go through this journey, and that you guys trusted in me so much, and something that you built since you started in '82. I was a little boy when you guys did that. And then you trusted me to get across the finish line, and then we got to, you know, go to dinner, and it was just, that's awesome. That was such like something I will never forget.
And you know, as you were just talking, I think that one of the neatest things is, you know, we built this business, and, you know, we put money away for retirement, but our family was always more important. And so we made sure we invested in our kids and our family. And what the sale did was gave us the financial security to know that we're okay when I retire. And that's really a gift, really is, to know that that financial security is there. Will it change my lifestyle? No, but it'll allow me to live the lifestyle that we have had.
That's a lot on the line, right? People say, well, you know, buying a home is the most important decision of your life, financials. I'm like, if you own a business, the chances are that's going to be the one, right?
And I will tell, it was not easy at first. I'm still working.
Yeah.
It's so weird. I mean, my secretary, my former office, no, the office manager of the practice, who's no longer my office manager, and that's very difficult to say because I love her as if she was one of my daughters or kids, always looks at me and says, "It's not your circus, it's not your monkey anymore."
Yeah.
And it's so freeing.
Yeah.
You know, you don't realize the burden of running a business until the burden's not there.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's really interesting. And this transition, it's weird.
You talk about, I think a lot of times people talk about stress, which I think is kind of part and parcel, right, to that. And you don't even realize sometimes that you're stressed, right? Until you go on vacation or you sell your practice and you're like, wow, like I'm at a different level now. Like, I don't have this burden of
down to the little minute detail that there's a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
The doorstop broke and the handle went through. I would have been on that like white on rice.
Yeah.
Patching it, painting it. No, there's still a hole in the wall. Toilet seat would be loose. And they're tightening it. I mean, as minute as that is,
Yeah.
it's so freeing not to have to think, where the hell is the plaster? Where's the paint? Where's the paintbrush?
It's definitely a selling point for somebody to move on.
Yeah.
Or at least begin that planning process and sell the business before you're ready to totally hang it up, so that it's a solid transition period, and because which buyers typically are going to want that in a lot of cases. Not every case, but especially in healthcare, you're seeing lots of patients.
And if you truly love what you do, I'm having more fun today than I have in a
which is
really long
great.
time.
And it's meaningful work too.
Oh yeah,
right? Like
no,
it's such meaningful work.
I love it.
It's I think that I've definitely been to mental health professionals times over the years, and it's really is honestly great. And sometimes, and I would say almost every time, they say something that's insightful and just helps me like navigate that tunnel of thoughts and emotions to where it makes sense, and you're able to now tackle the issues because you know what the issues are. And so the work that you guys do is so meaningful. And I remember I was in college at SMU, and I ended up I majored in psychology. And it's funny because my dad always told me that it was the subject that he enjoyed the most in college. And my dad will tell you he was not an exceptional student, but psychology appealed to him. And I took it. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I majored in psych, and I went and got my master's in finance later. But one of my friends even told me once, he was like, "What are you going to do with that? It's like a useless degree." And I was like, but I don't feel like that. I mean, psychology applies to everything.
Yes.
We're in a world of human beings.
Yes.
And there's 6 billion of us.
And whether you go on to finance or whatever, whatever you learned in...
now you see on my phone, on through my social media feeds, are all of these classes going through Duke and Wharton and Harvard and University of Miami, of all these finance-related behavioral fields, behavioral-related finance fields, or investing fields, or management fields, or all of these things that like help you better understand how people make decisions and how people make biased decisions,
Right.
Not based on logic, but based on their own biases and things like that. And so I look back and I say, man, I'm really glad that I majored in psych.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it for a second. And in an alternate universe, I don't know if you know this, but I would have loved to have been a sports psychologist. I think that's such a fascinating field. And I read all these books by Dr. Bob Rotella, who's a famous sports psychologist. And
So do you know, I was this close to
well, you
being...
did some studies on that, or you
I
did some work on that.
I did. We did some work with
Oklahoma State or something, or
St. Thomas University.
St. Thomas.
Women's basketball team in Miami, in which we used one of our tools, our treatment modalities, to train the women. and
Yeah.
the performance was exponentially increased besides the personal gains that these women made. The next year, the golf coach came to me and said, I heard what you did for our basketball team. Would you do it for our golf team? Team that had not won tournaments prior to that.
Yeah, yeah.
That year they won 4 tournaments. The average
I love
handicap average handicap of every person, every player, was reduced after we did our treatment. Pretty cool.
That's amazing. I think that the body of evidence is overwhelmingly in support of sports psychology. So when I was a kid, I had 2 pretty notable experiences as a witness of sports psychology. Number one, my father was a professional race car driver at the time, and he had felt that he had somewhat of a mental block, and he raced at a high level. He wasn't necessarily a household name, but he was well known in the racing community. And he hired a sports psychologist, a guy named Dr. Don Green, and he taught me. One of the things that my dad did for me as a kid is he told me a lot. He didn't treat me like a child, and he taught me like a grown-up. When I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and I was a curious kid, was always asking questions, and I was very enamored with my dad. I think he was my hero, and still is.
Still is.
And he walked me through. One of the things is, like, as a parent, like, he never really hid his insecurities or weaknesses from me. So that made me respect him more. I think a lot of dads would see that as well. They see vulnerability. That just made me respect him more. Kind of back to our original talk about dealing with buyers, right? You're kind of disclosing that baggage up front. We were like, hey, I'm not hiding anything from you.
Right.
So if this is a problem, you can go the other way. But if not, let me tell you about what's great about this business. Let me tell you what I can offer you. And so he had a mental block with he was qualifying the car very well, but he wasn't able to finish the race in
the same time.
Level, right?
Yeah.
The same level. And so he hired a sports psychologist and experienced a lot of success from that. And it was a lot of visualization. Okay, what do you want to achieve? Well, I want to win the race. Okay, what does that look like?
Right.
Okay, you're on the pole position. You're starting the race. Close your eyes. And back then he was in Formula Atlantic, which is famous for having what they call standing starts. So a lot of racing, the cars are moving when the green flag's waved. These are standing starts. So like Formula One you see now,
right.
And with mechanical clutches and stuff, which they don't have now. Like you drop that clutch the wrong way, like a street car, you stall the car, right? And so you're nervous, the butterflies are going, and getting to that first corner first is super crucial, because if you lose that advantage in that position, you may not get it back, especially in a sprint race, right? It's not endurance. So he was, it was a lot about visual. What does that look like? Okay, what's the air smell like? Dropping that clutch, what does that feel like when you launch? Then what do you do? Do you move here? Do you move there? Okay, walk that first lap and just visualize you're going to hit every corner perfectly and every shift perfectly. And he experienced a lot of success from that. And he shared a lot of that with me, which I was starving for, because my brother was 6 years older than me. So my brother was always in the pits, and he got to see all this stuff because of his age. And then shifting to a different gear, I was a huge Braves fan as a kid, because living in South Florida, there was no Marlins in the late 80s and early 90s. And I was playing Little League Baseball, and I just loved it. And a lot of my friends were playing. And all we had on TV for professional baseball were the Braves on TBS. And so that was my choice. And then in 88, 89, 90, they lost 100 games a year. They were absolutely terrible. When 91 comes around, and the first half of the year, they were always a young team, so they had a lot of really good farm system. And it was like, hey, they're kind of a 500 team going into the break. Like, this doesn't happen. What's going on? We got a couple good players. We got a new GM. He's signing some guys that are really good at defense and fundamentals. But we had a guy named John Smoltz, who turned out to have, I don't think he was a Hall of Famer, but if not, he was close. Had a very long, illustrious career. But back then, he was coming into he was a starting pitcher in the first year for the Braves, or the second year, and he was like 2-11 at the break with a 5.5 ERA, and he had control issues, and he was a mess. And so in baseball, they have the All-Star break, right? Which is like a week. In baseball, that seems like a year. And he hires a sports psychologist very famously. In the second half of the year, he goes on an absolute tear. He goes like 13-2. And the Braves were 7.5 or 8 games back at the break. And they came back in the last game of the season, they won the division title. And Smoltz had this unbelievable, and he went on to have an amazing career, first as a starter and then as a reliever. And so those two examples to me were like such a, proof of the legitimacy of that profession. And it's such a niche thing, right? But like, I've always loved sports and, obviously this line of work too. And so, if I had to make a pivot tomorrow, I don't think I could reinvent myself at 47, but I don't know.
Never too late.
Maybe it's never too late. If maybe my wife goes out and wins a Powerball or something.
There you go.
Yeah, then now I'm playing with house money,
Yeah.
But so Rick, what if you had a billboard and you could say whatever you would have wanted to say? What would it say? And it was it was on 595 and 100,000 people a day got to see it, and that was your message.
Be here now.
Be here now. Wow. Such a relevant. Life is short. Don't sweat the small stuff.
Be present.
Be present. We're so overly connected.
Yeah.
Right? We're here, but we're not here.
We're always out in the future.
Man, you pivoted really well to that. Can't say enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy. I can't thank you enough.
For coming on, and you and
Yeah.
Marie were such amazing clients and now friends, more importantly. And so maybe we'll do it again sometime.
My pleasure. Absolutely, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a wrap.
Here we go. It's gonna happen right here. Yeah. Boom. Boom.